unaccustomed as I am to public speaking.
Hey everyone, it's Parker. I'm back with Pete Blatchford,
Welcome.
um, actor, playwright, historian, author, and all around good guy and funny. Um, well, we've got a kind of a serious topic tonight. So we're not quite at the 100th anniversary of the Iroquois fire. So I asked Pete a little while ago if we could start to do some presentations on that, break apart the book a little bit and do a micro focus on topics. And this was the first one that made sense, really popped right out. So December 30th, 1903,
Mhm.
a day Chicago should never forget. Um, and we're going to talk about why
Hmm.
tonight. So thanks for joining us for What Do You Know, right? I think that's maybe a good title. Um, and then we would be happy to take your questions. Feel free to post in Facebook, and we'll check in there. We also get them here on StreamYard. So, and as Pete said, if he doesn't know the answer, we'll dig around and find out. It and maybe like me, you've only maybe heard a little bit about this fire. Not that any fire is insignificant, but this one, for many reasons, is quite important, and it really does change theater history ultimately. So we're going to talk about why. So all right, welcome, Pete,
Hello.
and why don't you give us a little background about the theater, the Iroquois, before the fire. So what do we know about the theater, its building and design, and who wanted it?
Well, the Iroquois Theater was built in the wake of the Great Chicago Fire. Um, at that time, because of the fire, great lengths were taken to ensure the fire readiness of any public building. And so it was with the Iroquois, or so they would have you believe. Um, the the Iroquois. The other important thing about the Iroquois is that at this time, theater in general in Chicago and nationally to a lesser extent, New York was well established, of course, but Chicago theater and theater outside of the New York was still viewed with kind of jaded eyes. I mean, people enjoyed the entertainment, no doubt, but it still kind of had a stigma of fly by night entertainment, take your money and run, and really not that good at quality productions anyway. Um, and so the Iroquois and production and theaters at the time were still sort of riding on the goodwill of the people that had begun in around the turn of the century or so. It had taken that long. Companies like the Hull House Players had helped play a part in sort of establishing a good reputation for the art of the theater and things like that.
In
Now,
fact,
yes.
in fact, one thing I read was that so because New York, yes, was established,
Mm-hmm.
the Iroquois was created to kind of put Chicago on the map in
Well,
terms of theater.
yes, of course. Yeah, it was. Unfortunately, it's an age-old story. It was it it was an example of where producers were okay. It was sort of would give a nod and the wink to the fire laws that had been established post-fire, and there were allegations of misconduct of people of the firefighters being bribed with tickets to the show.
Right.
Um,
Right.
there were it was it was in its construction, it was beautiful. It was transcendent. Like so many theaters of the time, the Iroquois was built to transport the audience to another world, to create so that one would have this total immersion and fantasy and illusion. It's an art which theater and to another extent dance can only really create.
Mm-hmm.
And so the moment you walk through these doors, you see this beautiful lobby and esplanade, and it's just.
In fact, it's magnificent. It might even be reminiscent for folks who have been to the Lyric
Yes.
of that grand entrance, marble steps, high drapes, and so it certainly has that appearance. What was the scope of the project in terms of how much money did it cost to build this?
I don't know the exact figure. I would say probably somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe $100,000 or more. You'd have to Google that and
Okay.
Exactly. But it was resplendent, as you can see by this one illustration. Perhaps not so much for the wealthier patrons, but certainly for the people who didn't, for the workaday folk, who were, for them, going to a show like Mr. Bluebeard was not something they did all the time. It was a big event in their lives. You go downtown, you dress up, you save your money for your tickets to go see this spectacular, and indeed that's what it was. It was a spectacular, such as the advertising would suggest.
Right, one of Aristotle's, right, the spectacle, right, the elements of theater, spectacle.
And it wasn't relegated. The spectacle was not just relegated to the stage. I was just reading just today, to sort of bone up on this, that you had aerialists flying above the heads of the audience. This really, so it's really this kind of, you've got the stage show going on, this aerial show going on above your heads, totally immersion into this fantasy world, which is at the time, was really something else. And it was
it would be even now.
Yes,
like
indeed.
Cirque du Soleil, right? And you've got people flying overhead, and the proscenium is enormous, goes on forever.
Yes, as much as I enjoy a nice piece of gritty realism as next as the next theater person, but there's nothing quite like the pageantry of a spectacle.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, you and me both. Give me a storefront theater, but I'm happy at the Nutcracker as well.
Yes,
right. And it makes me very happy.
Yes, and the Nutcracker, I think. Shows like the Nutcracker have evolved. They have not remained the same. I believe the current production is set during the World's Fair, the Chicago World's Fair, as has its equally long-running companion, the Goodman's A Christmas Carol.
Right.
Not stayed the same. The characters are the same. The basic story is the same, but they have taken great license with that story, as well they should, because that's what one of the things that theater does best.
Right.
And you have to keep up with current trends, and
to stay relevant and alive.
So keep doing the same show over and over again, particularly something like A Christmas Carol or Nutcracker, people aren't going to show up anymore.
No,
you need to have them give them a reason to.
So Claw and Erlinger.
Yeah,
it looks like the cost is $1.1 million, which is a lot, 1903.
All right.
But they get behind the schedule, right?
Yes.
And so there's a great push to get the Iroquois finished. Corners are cut.
Yes.
And there's workers go on strike.
Yes, and there were some of the corners that were cut included. There were no sprinklers. The alarm systems were not functioning. There were no phones, and the water circulation there wasn't any.
There were no sprinklers. Yeah.
Right. So they were just in this rush, deciding we'll get the show open. it'll be fine. And indeed, for the first few weeks, they opened like on the 21st of December, everything was fine.
And in fact, the architect apparently, I heard one historian say this was a case of complacency, hubris,
Yes.
and greed.
Yes.
The architect's hubris.
Mm-hmm.
So the lighting path design that we now look for in theaters,
Yes.
right? In the event of an emergency, there's the path to the door.
Mm-hmm.
That did not fit in with his design.
No, it was just the Mr. Claw and Erlanger was just say, pack him in, pack him in, and the result was a terrible tragedy.
So there are stories so fire marshals come out, city officials come out and say, it's interesting foreshadowing of the Titanic. 9 years later, and they say fireproof, and in fact they use the word fireproof, and then it comes out that they were basically paid to say this is a fireproof building, when in fact no sprinkler, the asbestos curtain is not made of asbestos,
right,
and no telephones, and this is not a luxury in 1903,
right.
So it's a stunning comment. It's almost like strike me down with lightning kind of comment to say this is fireproof.
Apart from the sloppiness and there were other mitigating factors which contributed to the Holocaust that was the Iroquois Theater fire. The method of testing for being a theater being fireproof was to set the curtain on fire, the main curtain on fire, which was supposedly made of asbestos, with gasoline. You set it on fire, and if it didn't take, you passed. Now, and that was the case. That was the case in the Iroquois. Now, what compounded the tragedy was that they recognized the fire. It's not like no one did nothing. The actors on the stage, particularly Eddie Foy, who was one of the principals, tried to calm people down, and they indeed lowered the main curtain to prevent a disaster. What happened was the curtain came down halfway, causing the fire to shoot out into the audience, and people were trapped, burned instantly alive.
In fact, there's such an interesting succession of perfect storm events.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it by design and some of it by action, right? By immediate action. So let's talk about the design. We've mentioned that the sprinklers, there were no sprinklers, no phones, no lighted pathways.
Right.
But another piece of this is that, first of all, let's talk about the capacity. So it's at about 1,100.
Right.
But that day, and this is a matinee.
Yes.
A lot of Chicagoans and people from out of state are coming in for a day of shopping and enjoying the city, and they're going to take their little ones because this is a really, a family-friendly play.
Oh, yeah.
So this is really mothers and kids we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
To Mr. Bluebeard.
Right, exactly.
And so that capacity of 1,100, which is already onerous, the owners of the theater decide to allow 2,000. Is that right?
About that, yeah.
Standing room, as one thing I read, four deep from the top row.
Right.
And people sitting in aisles.
I know.
So we've got this element of it. So the decision is made to sell well beyond capacity, right? Mm-hmm. Another decision is made in terms of, so of course, this has not changed in history, but the cheap seats, right, are way, way, way up.
Right.
And to prevent people from sneaking down into better seats, or even to prevent people from coming in from the outside
Mhm.
to see the show, doors are locked
Right.
and gates are locked between levels.
And there you have the one of the analogies between this disaster and the Titanic,
Yeah.
with gates being locked to prevent the the rabble from getting into the better
From
part.
right, exactly. From getting the better seat. So what else? I mean, and let's go back a little bit. Let's talk about the show itself,
Okay.
Mr. Bluebird,
Right.
Beard.
Right.
What do we know about the show that was the only show actually to play at the Iroquois, right?
Yes, it was a show out of New York, and this was the touring company. You had Eddie Foy, as I mentioned. He was a Chicago-based actor who had made good, probably most famous for his little troupe of his own children called the Seven Little Foys. If you were so interested, there's a biopic starring Bob Hope called The Seven Little Foys, and there is a segment in the film that does cover, however cursory, the Iroquois fire. The actor playing Mr. Bluebeard was Dan McAvoy, sorry, and there were other artists, a lot of big, large chorus, plenty of spectacle, not a lot of plot, but that's not what we signed up for. I said they were aerialists. One of the aerialists, let's see here, I have her name written down here.
And in fact, the play was enormously successful, right, at the Royal Theater in Drury Lane in London. It transfers here. Eddie Foy stars in it. It's packing the house, right, from November 23rd when the Iroquois opens.
Right.
It's just stunning to think this theater was open a little over a month. But they're packing the house with this show. And so the word's gotten out, and they've completely truly packed the house this performance.
Yeah. These were kids on holiday, and you had wealthy patrons mixed with working class patrons, which was kind of the idea, something that throughout theater history, not just Chicago, well, particularly Chicago, but not relegated to the city, to be able to have a shared experience with people from all backgrounds, all walks of life.
Right. Right.
Something that John Rice had aspired to do when he created the separation of the classes by introducing the balcony, where the riffraff could be on the floor, and those and the more wealthy patrons could be above them. But yes, this was a huge hit. The mind sort of boggles as to what this. I wonder if there have been restagings of this production, or maybe given its tragic history, perhaps not so much. Perhaps it's taboo.
Right. They get to the second act, so it's about 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yes, and then something goes wrong with one of the spotlights.
The spotlight. They're doing some 8 couples, right? 8 duets under the pale moon. Right. Octave, and one of the lights arcs and sparks into the curtain.
Yes, and at first there was kind of these little bits of fragment that were floating down, and there were burning debris, and the audience didn't panic right away because they thought it was part of one of the special effects from the show.
Right.
In a matter of fact, if anything, they kind of go ooh and ah.
Right. Ooh, yeah. Right. Ooh, ah.
What more does this show have to offer us? Look.
Right.
I mean, debris. It's beautiful. Spectacular.
Right. It's part of the spectacle.
And then,
Uh,
yeah,
and when at what point do people start to realize something's not quite right?
well, what they realize when the curtain starts to come down, they and it stops about halfway down, and the flames start shooting out into the crowd. That's when everybody gets up, starts running for the exits. You know, there are people in the aisle, as you point out, so they step on those people. They go up against the exits. The exit doors are, some of them are locked, and those that are not locked are not designed to open in. They're designed to open inward, not outward. So they run up against these doors, and there's nowhere to go.
And they're stacked, and the firefighters find them 10 deep.
10 deep.
Yeah, on the
Yeah.
ground. So Eddie Foy, not long after, right, who is later hailed as a hero of this, has an usher, directs an usher to go grab his own child, right, from the audience,
Right.
and then tells people to stay seated,
Yes.
be calm, everything is under control, and actually makes the statement and reminds them that this is fireproof. It's a fireproof theater.
Yes.
He tells the orchestra to play, which, you know, there's the analogy to the Titanic as well.
Yes. Yes.
And almost as though it, you know, like talk about, you know, the drama that supersedes the drama, as he's telling people it's fireproof, don't panic, right? Oil painted scenery, you know, inflamed oil painted scenery starts dropping down behind him.
Yep.
Now, how long after that announcement does Foy leave?
Not long. I don't know the exact amount of time, but he himself managed to escape by going down a sewer in the back of the theater. All of the actors, save one, the aerialist Nellie Reed, was trapped. She was like high up, and she was trying to make her ready to make an entrance, which involved her sort of swooping down in front of the audience. And she wasn't unable to escape. She was trapped by the flames. She didn't die right away, but 3 days later, she succumbed to her injuries, smoke inhalation and burns over her body and that sort of thing. She was the only performer that died or was injured. The rest were able to sneak out the back of the theater. And they say to this day, next time you're down at the Oriental, because that's where the
oh yeah, it is where it is.
That's one of the most haunted blocks.
The stops of the haunted tour. Yeah, it's on Randolph, for folks who know Chicago, near State and Dearborn. So what it's been called the Oriental, and now it's the James Niederlander Theater. Yes. But so at some point, people push through the whether it's actors or whomever, they push through the scene, the stage doors.
Yes.
To allow. And what one fire historian says is that because it's cold, it's Chicago in late December.
Yep.
A blast of cold air comes in. I mean, it's perfect storm, right? Mixes with the hot air and flames, and creates basically a fireball.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's, best intentions. File under best intentions.
Right. They push the doors open, the air comes in and feeds, and the fireball is so intense and so big that children, whoever's in the balcony, they say it's killed instantly killed.
Well, mercifully, I guess.
I would say mercifully.
Yes.
So let's talk about the deaths beyond, that. What does the day look like for firefighters, and when does help come? And, how we're talking about a death toll of, they think 602, but probably a lot higher. Yes.
Well, help was summoned almost immediately, and the help came in the form of not just the firemen, but in passerbys, in journalists writing about, who were there to report on the production. It was one of those moments where you kind of felt proud. You would have felt proud to have been a Chicagoan, because there was a crisis. People did not think of themselves. They just helped whenever they could. And much like the Eastland tragedy that would come a few years later, people just they were not thinking of themselves. They were thinking about, oh, what a horrible situation. I have to help.
Right.
And they did. And then so help came from all corners: policemen, journalists, people off the streets.
Yeah, one railway worker, I guess, had his tools with him.
Yes.
And managed to take a door off.
Yes.
Off its hinges and saved dozens of lives, they said.
Yes, they just wanted to see what they could do to help, and
But even so, so 1,400, somehow survive, get out. Many have injuries. Some will die later of the injuries. So some of the children who are taken to the morgue will be just taken by their parents and not identified as victims. What is the scene like inside the theater in terms of when the fire? I think it largely extinguishes. It burns out.
Right. Yeah, that runs
by
out
the time the firefighters really can get in.
Well, structurally, the theater was okay, and once the inspectors had gone through and they'd made the upgrades, they made the changes, and they repaired and they'd replaced the stage and the curtains and all that. The Iroquois reopened under the name the Colonial Theater, and for a brief time it was the Illinois Theater, until the entire structure was so. Despite the devastation of the fire, structurally the building was fairly sound, and it was torn down in 1925, and is to make way for the newer, brand new Oriental Theater, which, as we all know, is still with us today.
So inside they find, carnage, and people right on top of one another trying to get out.
People's heel marks embedded in people's faces.
And we're talking a lot of children.
Too many children. Too many.
Right. Stomped. Yeah, stomped on, and memorial. You have a photograph in the book.
Yes.
Of the memorial, and the memorial of the 600 lives lost. Where is that taken? That's a drawing. Where is that taken from?
The memorial itself, I believe. I don't remember. It's in one of the. It's on a cemetery on the north side. But which cemetery it is I can't remember.
Okay, and the drawing looks kind of like maybe from a newspaper of the day.
Right. The current memorial is this kind of rectangular, or not rectangular, sort of this diamond shape, and with the inscription here, and then it has the listing it was a listing of some of the victims. No, I'm sorry. No, it does not. It's just a memorial to the people whose lives were lost. Doesn't say much more than that. It's very simple, clean. It was erected soon after the fire as a tribute to the victims. And that is that's one of the, apart from visiting the Oriental, you can visiting the monument itself is another way you could sort of pay
some tribute to it. You said it's a stop on the haunted Chicago tours.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is. Yeah, and people to this day see strange things. Let me tell you.
Okay.
So if you're
Okay.
into that sort of thing, this will. I think you'll enjoy it. You don't even have to go on the haunted tour. You can just go there yourself and see if you have a close encounter with
Just watch a show.
right.
Okay. And you had a photograph of the skylights.
Mm-hmm.
And what role did they play? Oh,
Um,
the rooftop. What was that? Why was that significant? I know that the fire escapes, some of them were unfinished.
the yes, the skylights are significant in that they had not been. There wasn't enough airflow to. So when the curtain came down halfway and forcing the flames out of the audience, part of the reason that happened was because there was no vacuum effect to draw the flames upward like a flue in a chimney, and those so the ventilation system would have prevented that. It would have drawn. It was. It would. The thinking was that it would have. And had they been functioning, had they not taken some shortcuts, had they actually not been in such a rush to open this show, little important, significant details like that would have been attended to properly. Um, but alas, they were not. So this is this image here is just kind of a sore reminder of the shortcuts that were taken, um, and the lives that could have been saved if only they just taken a little bit more time, spent a little bit more money. Um, it's just in retrospect, you scratch your head.
You scratch your head, and we haven't even talked about some of. I mean, there were more misdeeds and more problems. But what what's stunning, another really stunning piece of this, is that there's no justice ultimately.
Ultimately, yes, the lawyers just kind of dragged it on through the courts, and it was just one of those things that is very callous. You wouldn't think that such things went on, but we know, we're well aware that such things go on nowadays, but you wouldn't think that they would have gone on back then. Well, let me tell you, friends, they did. And as a result, the lawyers they knew they didn't have a case. And so they just stalled for like 3 years until everybody just said, fine.
We're done. Right.
Even though the mayor himself was not, Carter Harrison Jr. was not to blame, he was held. He was blamed for it. And it is thought that part of the reason that he didn't win re-election the next time around was because of the fire.
They dragged the case out, so no one, not the architect, not the producers, not the builders, no one, not the officials who were bribed, no one was ever held accountable legally. No one was even ever fined.
Nope.
And here's the but, and it's a sad, however, it changes theater history, this fire. So how does that happen?
Well, the people in New York, people in San Francisco, people along the way kind of looked up and they sat up and they took notice. And they realized that, okay, well, maybe perhaps some of them may have been, like-minded, as Claw and Erlanger were in terms of like cutting corners, but they weren't necessarily willing to. Well, another event like this with such large loss of life that so clearly could have been avoided wasn't something that they wanted to do. It wasn't something they didn't mind, turning a buck. They didn't mind sort of exploiting people, but they did have to kind of draw the line some point. For nationally, the laws that were established in Chicago for fire safety in theaters then went national. They became the blueprint, and they were expanded on, so that the rest of the country benefited from our tragedy and just a horrible loss of life.
So we know that from this fire, and you're right. They while there was no legal or no real ramifications, we do know, right? Things change. So from now on, that going forward, theaters have what they call the panic bar.
Yes.
Right, with doors. The doors now open outward.
Yes.
And you get that sign, the fire alarm will sound if you do, but at least you can get out.
Yes, and of course from that point forward, there were no audience allowed in the aisles.
Right.
That was one of the first things to go.
Right.
But you're right. That was agreed. The another very obvious to us, but was at the time people didn't really think about it, was when you have exit doors, first of all, make sure they're unlocked, and second of all, make sure they open outward. People push against them, they can get out. It was so the simple things at the time they saw it. It's such a tragedy. There's so many lives could have been saved just taking a few little small cautions, but no. So yes, that's the legacy of the Iroquois fire.
The legacy of the Iroquois and the lighted pathways, and the laws then were not particularly strong. This is the era of Upton Sinclair's The Jungle.
Right.
So 1903, we're not. Things are not, children are not particularly protected in terms of labor. No. But even so, these folks went beyond what was expected. So what we have the Iroquois to thank, and if there's any bright side to this, it's that it changes enough laws and puts enough fear into future builders.
Yes.
That
yes.
we now know that fire escapes will be completed, lighted paths will be, and there will no be people sitting in them.
Theater capacity signs will be prominently
will be observed, and this is pre-COVID, so so it does have all of that. I did find it's Montrose Cemetery.
That's it.
And the I had it. I put it up in the slide thing, but it's a beautiful little diamond.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it didn't make it in there. Shaped slab to the victims. The book Pete has written is called "Wicked, Immoral, and Utterly Bad: An Illustrated History of Chicago Theater." And we're past. A little bit past the buying season, although it's New Year's, and maybe you forgot someone.
Resolved in 2022 to own a copy of my book, Wicked, Immoral, Utterly Bad.
That's right. You can be the first person. It's a fascinating book. The Iroquois fire is just one of the segments. People who are from Chicago or have had the blessing to live near Chicago or in Chicago, as I have, know that the theater history is rich, multi-layered, and really exponentially important in terms of the theater in the country and the world. Pete goes into a lot of the where things began, right? The roots of improv, of ensemble, of all of it, and a lot of the roads lead back to Chicago theater.
New York gets a lot of the credit for sort of establishing theater in this country, and rightly so, and for innovations such as the development of what we now know as the modern Broadway musical. But, Chicago, in return, gave them vaudeville. There was years ago, changing scenes was much more difficult early on in the theater. And so audiences tend to sort of drift out in a way and sometimes maybe even leave the theater altogether. There needed to be a way to and a reason for audiences to want to stay. And so little entertainments, little in front of the curtain were created. Dance numbers, singers, what have you, comedians. There was a man in the audience from New York, and he saw this, and he said, you know what? I could package this, and I could just have this as an entertainment all by itself. And so he went back to New York, and he created all this theater known for its variety entertainment. Another offshoot, of course, of the vaudeville is the burlesque. They're basically companion entertainment, and there you have it. So that was Chicago, although that was Chicago's gift to New York per se.
One of the gifts, right? Besides, right, Tracy Letts Productions transferring, yeah. Right, one of the many gifts, right? Many people, though, Mamet, do look at their Chicago connection very fondly, and believe that they are who they are because of their experiences with Chicago theater and improv, and performing arts. So the book is called Wicked, Immoral and Utterly Bad, and I'm going to bring that slideshow back up so you can see where to get it. It's not just, I wouldn't say a coffee table book. It's actually just a fine book to have. If you're interested in theater, if you're interested in, some of the events, and what's lovely about it is that you can pick up a chapter like the one on the Iroquois Fire, and you've got amazing photographs and graphics accompanied by text that just frames it all beautifully and pulls it all together. So Jane Addams, all of our Neva Boyd, all of the luminaries, Eddie Foy, all of the luminaries, all of the people, all of the events that add up to the pastiche that is Chicago Illustrated, including, of course, Mr. Joseph Jefferson, if you're watching, Rip Van Winkle.
Yes, indeed. And of course, we can't forget, for those of you who remember dinner theater, it was started here in Chicago. Started on the southwest side of the city in Summit, Illinois, and created a phenomenon that was around for years.
I think it's still around. I'm sure I hear some glasses clinking and forks on plates somewhere.
Good.
As the overture to Showboat is. I'm sure if I listen closely enough. The website is wickedchicagostage.com, and you can find out more about the book and Pete there. The book is available on Amazon, at the Goodman Theater, Barnes and Noble, and you're welcome to message Peter me on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll be happy to send you links. So, and maybe you have an idea for the next topic, and we can do this again. Yeah. You're like, yeah. Anyway, thank you everyone for watching. Hope you have a great, happy New Year. Pete, anything else we didn't cover or we should add?
There's so much. I mean, this is like so many of the chapters in the book. This is not the definitive history. It's not the whole story. And if you are interested, there are authoritative histories on the Iroquois Theater fire. I encourage you to seek them out and learn all that you can learn. So many of the chapters that are in the book are meant to entice, whet the appetite, to perhaps encourage your own personal researches on these subjects. Find out for yourself, should you be so inclined, and write a better book than I did.
Oh, well, there you go.
Um,
You don't get to hear that much, but it's a very fine book. So treat yourself, and I'll get it right here with the camera. Pete, thank you so much again.
Parker. Thank you all. For this.
Yeah, thank you everyone for watching, and either live or later. Welcome to message comments or questions, and we'll and if you have an idea about something you want, what do you want to know? What do you know about Chicago theater history? Send away and let us know. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New
Good
Year.
night.